So I want to apologize in advance if this video isn't all too entertaining. It's been a very long day, so to speak, and kind of just feeling out of it at the moment, but hopefully I can make it somewhat enjoyable. With that said, I hope your day is going well, drinking plenty of water, eating some good food. You deserve it. Today, however, I wanted to talk about the Culling games and a couple of different sub-facets of the Culling games and a couple of different comparisons, right? So I've kind of broken this up into three different parts. And they shouldn't be all too crazy or all too in-depth, because I believe I've made separate videos on all of these topics for the most part, but for relevancy's sake I thought I would compile it all together and make it a bit more streamlined. So the three subcategories that I want to focus on is the structure of the Culling games versus Shibuya, an acknowledgement towards the recent conversations in regards to Yuta and Yuji, and then the future of Kaizen, the future of the Culling games, and how it can potentially recontextualize a story once again in a completely different way, or to at least elevate it to the next level. Because I think that train of thought is within a lot of people's minds currently. What is the next step? And if you've read the most recent stuff of the Culling games, it's kind of getting to that point. Starting off with the Culling games and Shibuya, I am a big advocate for Shibuya. I absolutely love it. I think it's beautifully handled. There's a lot of reasons for this, but primarily its structure is what impresses me the most, and how early on it's introduced so well and so efficiently. Theoretically, an arc like Shibuya shouldn't be possible that early on. This is stuff that you would normally see much later within the lifespan of a story. And in Weekly Shonen Jump's case, an arc like that would take place 200, 300, potentially 400, 500 chapters, the midway point of a story. The sheer scale, complexity, the fights, the tension that it produces, and how it grips you every single week, but continues to escalate it further and further, while making it more emotional, more personal, and more intimate. This is a very impressive thing to do, and doubly more with how early it actually takes place, considering the 70 to 80 odd chapters prior is directly building up for it. And when you look at those 70 to 80 chapters, it's not a whole lot of time to get accustomed to characters, to fall in love with them, to find the value within them, to progress them far enough to have them feel influential and, most importantly, impactful within this very massive arc. When I say that the structure of Shibuya is very impressive to myself, it's because it continuously one-ups it every single time. Each iteration, each situation or scenario is purposefully building up higher and higher. Now this sounds like a pretty normal thing, right? Every arc is going to have something very similar, so it constantly raises your value towards this arc, this tension, this climatic peaks, right? You'll see a lot of people talking about peaks within a story, and the foundation that's laid for that within stories from Weekly Shonen Jump is centered normally around fights. Shibuya does this and a couple of other things to help make the arc actually function, to make it possible. At the same time, it also recontextualizes the story and changes everything that comes after it, almost like it's a complete new story that comes after it. And the Culling games is kind of like its sister arc. Something very similar to Shibuya, but different in scale and complexity. The first and most vital thing that they do is they get rid of Gojo, someone that is too powerful to manage, too powerful to keep around, and all of these fights would lose their value. Obviously, you could handle this a different way if you kept him around, but this is what drives a lot of tension. It's what drives a lot of desperation. Knowing that Gojo isn't there to help people, isn't there to save the day, isn't there to finish what people potentially can't, is very valuable. The second is that every altercation towering over the previous one usually jumps between what I consider power moments and emotional moments. These aren't mutually exclusive, they bleed into each other, but it helps elevate that next altercation. So one moment may be just straight power, might be just straight throwing hands, showing off crazy ability, right? And this is really cool. But the next moment may be more emotional, maybe more impactful, it might be more personal. Then directly after that, to one up it again, you have something even bigger in scale to power, that's bigger than the emotional moment, and that's bigger than the prior powerful moment. Do you see how it consecutively builds upon itself, jumping back and forth between these moments? A power moment and an emotional moment. This is directly molding your anticipation for what's next. You expect something bigger to come. And with how Shibuya likes to handle itself, you expect either one of these outcomes, a powerful moment or an emotional moment, some even a bit of both. To me, this is the most impressive thing because it's not an easy thing to do, especially because a lot of your emotional moments comes from how much value you as a reader has put into these characters, and that comes with time. 70 chapters isn't a lot to fall in love with a lot of characters. So even more so, the fact that it's worked so well is absolutely incredible, and it continues to rise until you reach a powerful moment that can't really be eclipsed, that can't be taken over, and that would be Sukuna and the Maharaga and Jogo situation. This was intense, no doubt about it. But you'll notice that the final altercation within the entire arc is emotional. It's personal, it's intimate, it's Yuji versus Mahito, something that's been building for the whole story. Add on Todo and Nobara and their very emotional moments, and this is the peak of that arc. It's not how much power one can do. It's not a brand new ability. It's not a brand new technique that Yuji has pulled out. It's personal. So now that you have my somewhat architectural perspective of Shibuya, how does this differ to the Culling games? It's not meant to differ per se, but it's more so meant to make you excited for what the Culling games is going to be, because think of early Shibuya and how it's continued to slowly build up over time to something much bigger, to something much personal. The Culling games is doing this currently, and already we have had some of the most beautiful power moments and emotional moments from so many different characters, and we're just starting. We are just beginning. To put that in perspective, we are somewhat coming to the conclusion of Yuta's introduction and his fight, and the power that he is showcasing us is insane. This would have been a fight that is closer to the end of Shibuya's arc, but for the Culling games, it's right at the beginning. This is only natural. This arc has to elevate the story once again, but in a completely different direction. It has to be higher in power, in scale, in emotional tension, and we are getting all of that. Everything with Yuji, everything with Maki prior to the arc, everything with Megumi and his personal growth. Do you see how it's switching back and forth between very powerful moments that are very exciting and very emotional, very similar to Shibuya? This is a style that Akutami loves, and he does it extremely well. The difference this time around, however, is that we have a power that we can show off that is extremely high, and we have two of them, technically, Yuta and Hikari. They may not theoretically equal out to Gojo's strength or what he's capable of, but they're definitely a great replacement role for him. He wasn't in Shibuya, these two are. Plus, we're in a very complex field where characters from 1,000 years ago can come back, that are just as powerful, if not more powerful than they ever were, in a place that will lead to something much bigger. See, the end goal of the Culling games completely changes our understanding of the story once again, similar to how Shibuya did. Gojo was sealed away in his entirety, and that changed the landscape of power. He was the pillar. He was the peak at which you could not surpass. But now that he is gone, any character can go up to that limit. Any character can get close to that level and potentially even surpass it, and that's exactly what Kenjaku is trying to do. We are only within the beginning of the Culling games, and it is about to change. Everything is about to change. For the longest time, I've always thought there is something more here, that this isn't just about Kenjaku transcending or absorbing Tengen or whatever is going to happen with that. Characters are growing exponentially quick for the biggest moments of the story. Sukuna is being awfully quiet and laying dormant. Megumi is pushing his domain even further. You have two of the most powerful individuals in the story very close to one another. You have powerful individuals coming back from 1,000 years ago that have very prominent abilities and techniques that are broken in some regards. I don't think this is going to be a continuous slugfest after this, with people just fighting each other to prove their worth. We still have a lot more personal and emotional moments to come through, of course, and we still have a lot of great fights, but something is about to shift. Our perspective of the Culling games, what it truly is, what it's meant to be. The evolution and understanding of cursed energy is changing rather rapidly. A lot more complex and interesting abilities are coming out to play, and I wouldn't be surprised after the Hikari and Panda fight that we see the outcome for it, where the Culling games will be going within its second half, or its final phase, if you will. A little bit long-winded and overly detailed, but hopefully that gives you a briefer understanding of how I'm currently viewing things with this story, because I'm absolutely loving it. I also added on the final part that I wanted to talk about in terms of how the Culling games is most likely going to recontextualize the story and the future of it, and how this arc, for me personally, is going to bleed into the finale of Kaizen. I don't know how much longer Akutami wants to make this story, but it wasn't only a year or so ago when we found out that Kaizen wouldn't be going on for that much longer. I could see this story lasting for potentially another 2 years, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. Not to shift conversation so drastically, but the Yuta and Yuji conversation is the last thing I want to touch on. There has been a lot of talk and a lot of comparison between the two characters, especially because Yuta is very relevant currently, obviously within the manga and the movie, and his showcase has been nothing short of phenomenal. It's been incredible. And this statement has somewhat been born from it that Yuta should have been the main character, or Yuta is, for whatever reason, a better main character. Now, I think it's perfectly fine to have your own perspective and your own opinions and thoughts. It's perfectly okay. However, Yuta was never intended to be a main character. Not only has Akutami kind of penned this himself, but even within the one-shot that Akutami done with Yuta, obviously the story would be completely different, but it would be very difficult to continue down that path with Yuta's character as a main character, as the protagonist of Jujutsu Kaisen's story that we know of. Because that is a very powerful being straight from the first chapter. The first thing you would have to do is hard nerf him completely, bring him back down to almost zero, but then that somewhat makes his character redundant in hindsight. And then you would have to slowly build him up again. But I don't think Akutami's intentions ever went further than that he was just a very strong character from the beginning because he's the embodiment of talent and prodigy. He's meant to be a pillar of power similar to Gojo, and when Gojo isn't here, Yuta takes his place. I understand people really enjoy his character, but there has been nothing within the story that has really proved to me personally that he would make a great protagonist, a great main character that we follow from start to finish. Everything would have to be rearranged and changed, and that's just a complete mind-boggling hypothetical that I can't really conjure up at the moment. But I do feel very confident in Yuji and what the story of Yuji and Jujutsu Kaisen is trying to tell. I think it's very easy for people to undermine Yuji, not necessarily enjoy him or have other characters over him, which is entirely up to you. That's perfectly fine. There's something very intimate about Yuji, something very personal. His growth throughout the story is so incredibly nuanced. You see it in such small increments and you can't help but feel sorry for him. He has been forcefully thrown into a world with the intention on top of him to adapt or die, and yet he has managed to progress so far mentally, emotionally, and physically based on his own merits with one of the most powerful and dangerous individuals inside of him. On one side tormenting him, and on the other side reminding him that if he fails, everyone dies. This is a burden that he has carried from the beginning, a burden that he has seen destroy other people, a burden that plagues him to this day. The destruction that Sukuna caused in Shibuya has left such a massive impact on Yuji's emotions. He is currently not okay. You most likely would have noticed how serious he takes things now. He has unfortunately lost a lot of that playful nature that he has. There's bits and pieces that are still there, obviously, but it no longer seems as genuine. He's scared, he's worried, but he's also working so hard to push so much further. Yuji, for me, walks a very fine line, and at the end of it, there is potentially nothing. That is what he has been told. That at the end of all of this, he will most likely die. It's not the most motivational thing, yet he has rised above the occasion. And let me just remind you, because I thought about this the other day and the perspective of it kind of really hit me. None of the main characters' fights within the entirety of the story has relied on bringing in a new technique, a new ability, a new showcase of something out of power. It's always been emotional. There's only one time that he's brought in a new technique. That is the Black Flash. That's like the pinnacle of it. Yet it's piggybacked off knowing that other people can do it, and that other people can do it not necessarily better than Yuji, but almost just as good. Yuji is not meant to be special in the power department, and the story showcases this, that his emotions within the world of sorcery is different to a lot of other people, and he has carved his path of true grit, true tenacity. He knows his worth, he knows his value, but he also knows what's happening to him, what the grand picture is, and it's this back and forth battle where they don't collapse and cannibalize each other. If you couldn't tell, I appreciate Yuji quite a bit, and this isn't to downplay Yuta. This isn't to make him look bad or to say that I hate him, because I really enjoy what he does. I enjoy the role that he plays and the value that he brings, but the value is not that of a main character. The value is not meant to compete with Yuji. They are inherently different. If there's any comparison you'd ever want to make just for argument's sake, it would be between Yuta and Gojo, because their roles are almost identical. And funny enough, Yuta is a lot more flexible because he actually can be managed around, whereas Gojo is just obnoxiously strong, very hard to handle. This has gone on for too long. I apologize for my nonsensical rambling, but I felt like I wanted to talk about Kaizen, and hopefully I did a bit of justice somewhere within here. here in regards to Shibuya and the Culling games and Yuta and Yuji and potentially even the future. I'm very excited to see what Akutami has in store for us. It has been nothing but treat after treat every single week. Undoubtedly, we are all eating good, and the future is only going to be bigger and better from here, all the way to the end. Endtime. So with that, welcome to the end of the video. If you have made it this far, thank you. I appreciate you. I would like to know two things. Let me know how you feel about the Culling games currently and whether or not you think the story is going to change or evolve into something else entirely. And how do you feel about the Yuta and Yuji conversation that's been happening recently? Let me know in the comment section below. But with that, I want to thank you all for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Leave a like and subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. Drink plenty of water, and I will see you within the next one. Goodbye.